Love, light, and blessings, shamanic hour priestess here. So, the topic of today's video is the devil card and pretty much my struggles with it. I had made a video. I don't remember exactly what video it was. I don't know if it was the tarot tag, the tarot tribe tag, or I think that's the video, or if it was the one about the psychic and intuition. I don't know. I know it was a recent video. And one of my lovely subscribers asked me, basically we're very inquisitive about, why was I afraid of the devil card and kind of how I overcame those fears. This has been a topic that's I've thought about for a while, and I have no idea why I've never made a video in the past about it. So I was like, let me make a video before I forget. And instead of me answering in the comment section and giving like a quick reply, I said, why not make a video about it? Because it's a common trend that some people have confessed to me they're afraid of getting into tarot because of the devil card, because of that fear of the devil, and some like the pentagrams that you see in like the pentacle suits, and things like that. Some of these symbology scares people, the nudity, the having the Satan on a card, because there's this like relations between tarot and somehow devil worship and things like that, and I've seen that very prevalent. Anyone who's in like a Abrahamic religious background, and things like that, Christian and or Muslim or whatever the case may be. I've had people like, I wanted to get a tarot reading, but like you use tarot cards and they'll scare me. And when, things like that, like I had a client, she loves going to me and she kind of referred me to a close friend of hers. And she's like, I would read with her, but she used tarot. So I started offering, again, on my site, like cartomancy for people that are afraid of tarot. Like I'll give you, I'll read playing cards. That way there's no like double card in it. But that whole thing kind of, and then that question, I think it was yesterday or the day before, or it could have been this morning, I don't remember, but I know recently, when she asked that, I was like, I need to make a video about this, because I'm not the only one that I've had conversations with various people that have struggled with the devil card in tarot. So I made some notes so I can keep this video condensed and get to the point, and things like that, of some important points I want to touch on to further elaborate my struggles with the devil card. So one of them being my upbringing, okay, and the lack of explanations of the spiritual practices that I grew up around. So as those who have been following me for a while know, that I come from a closed traditional spiritual background that I can date back to pretty much the 1800s. So it's something that the women in my family, so my grandma, my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, my great great grandmother, so on and so forth. And I'm not the only one that's actually talked about this. So even though I grew up in a spiritual family and with family members that practice close traditions, something that I found in common when I've had private conversations with people outside of YouTube, when they're messaging me on my contact form and telling me how their grandfather or their grandmother or so on and so forth used to practice, but they didn't know what the practice was. They just thought that that person was Catholic, because my mom always called herself Catholic. She went to Catholic church. So when I would see saint statues, I would associate that with the Catholic church, until I started talking to other people outside of Catholicism. And there was like this religious couple that lived in our building. They were Pentecostal, and I remember I was watching like one of those televangelists on TV, and they were talking about like how you can go to hell and you need to give your heart to God and all these things. And that's what I did, because I made a video, I might link it to this video, that maybe that'll give you more of a why, like background on me. Someone that has always been psychic, and I was born this way in a psychic medium. I've always seen the dead and entities and things like, since I was a very little girl, my earliest memories of just seeing these entities. Some of them never to this day don't even know what their names are. And I had one particular that was like with me all my life when I was younger and things like that. So, and again, I made a whole video about that, and I'm gonna try to link it to this video. But because of that and the lack of explanation, so when my mom would do rituals in the house, and people would start speaking in tongues and getting possessed, and offerings that would make to the spirits and things of that nature, no one ever explained to me what was happening. And so when I converted at the age of 9, going to church because I was tired of having sleep paralysis, I was seeing like dark spirits. I was seeing like demonic spirits, demon spirits, light spirits of light, but also spirits of darkness. So I was trying to find an answer to getting rid of that. And because I didn't know my mom was actually practicing anything, because again, they practice in secret but openly, if that makes sense. So nobody ever talked about what was really happening. She wasn't teaching me and mentoring me, because I feel like that's a common misconception. So you grew up in a witchy family. It wasn't like my mom was sitting there when I was a little girl and explaining things that were happening. They were just things that would happen. And when you're a child that doesn't understand stuff and it's outside of your friends group or things that people talk about in school and stuff like that, you tend to have fear. And then I watch movies like Chucky, where they made it seem like, Chucky was doing some type of African evil voodoo thing, and that's why he was an evil doll, and he was like a serial killer. And when you see all these Hollywood portrayals of what my mom was doing as demonic, and then I started going to church and they're preaching about how it's demonic, as a child, again, who's nobody's explaining anything to the child, I started associating my mom's practice with something demonic. I had, I was talking to, people in the church, and they were like, and I was telling them about these demonic attacks and sleep paralysis that I would get at night, and the top hat man, and all these really dark shadow people, and all these really scary spirits. And they were like, oh, it's because your mom's worshiping the devil and stuff. And so that's what I started thinking. So I rebelled against my mom's practice and things like that, because nobody was explaining it to me. It's why I don't force my kids to practice anything that I practice, but I'm very open with what we practice. Whereas my mom didn't call it anything. And I know a lot of people in Latino household and Afro-Latino household and Southern households where they did conjure, they never, a lot of the times, never explain things to the younger people. So a lot of the people either rebelled and went into Christianity, or just respected it, but they were so fearful of it because, again, nobody's explaining anything. So in my household, what I do differently is, I don't force my beliefs, but I'm open about what I do, and my kids are open to participate or not participate. But I let them know that I'm not doing anything quote unquote evil. You know what I mean? And things like that. Also, another reason, so when I had my first reading, and I loved it. She used the universal right away, which I, again, never heard of this because I did cartomancy. My mother did cartomancy and things like that. There was no tarot practice in my home. We read water. We read the elements. We used no tools. We let spirits take over and did the reading for us, and, those kinds of things. So channeling and all these, this is what I grew up around and things like that. So tarot didn't come into my life until later on. And when I had that reading, one of the cards was the devil card, and that scared me because I associated, even though I left the church in my early 20s, the devil with Satan and with hell. Because when I was in the church the whole time, I was being told how people that did divination and things like that, they're going to go to hell. So it brought up like bad memories of a very oppressive time in my life, where I was just trying to seek something that was going to help me with these experiences, which what ended up helping with the experiences was the very religious practices that I was hiding, that I was running away from, which was Santeria and Hoodoo and Haitian Voodoo, and things like that, and the shamanism, the Taino practices in my family. That's what actually helped me with the sleep paralysis and all these things. That's what actually healed me. That's why I'm in a good place now. But back then, I didn't see that because, again, I had to learn a lot of things. When I got older, my mom finally explained stuff, and I was able to understand what she was actually doing. But because she never did it when I was younger, and it was such a secretive thing, it created fear. And I associated the devil card with that time in my life and with the church. And just, I was so afraid to use that deck because I'm like, if I use it, I'm going to go to hell. You know what I mean? So it created fear because of lack of exposure. I didn't grow up with Rider-Waite-Smith. I grew up with other forms of divination, Again, and also third point, like I just mentioned earlier, going to church from 9 to my early 20s, and and being told how anybody who did divination was demonic. Because even when I went to do to get a reading done, I was shaking inside, even though I practiced divination myself, because she was using tarot, and I saw like pentagrams, and I saw all this symbology. Like, she was like, just breathe. Like, she could literally pick up the almost anxiety attack I was having just sitting there with her, like, oh my God, this is it. They're going to take my soul. When my mom started teaching me how to contact the other side, I felt that way too. And so that's why I had such an aversion to the devil card, because, growing up, and yes, it was my choice, getting into these fundamentalist religious practices forced me to pretty much have this fear that if I did anything against God, if I made God angry, he was going to put me in this eternal condemnation of hell. And so it was that religious background that I had that genuinely made me so afraid. I mean, when I was very religious, I would ask questions like, but if God is love, why did he allow slavery to happen? You know what I mean? When I started learning the history of, the Caribbean and the United States, when we covered a very short, it was like a day that we talked about slavery. I didn't understand if most black people that I knew, if most black Americans that I knew were very Christian, very Protestant, why were their ancestors in slavery? Like, why did that happen? Why is there so much starving children in other parts of the world, even in the United States? Like, if God is love, why? And the church will always say, oh, it's the sin of Adam and Eve, and this, so on and so forth. It's the devil. And I'm like, yeah, but they're like, but God, but I'm like, but God lets the devil do that. Doesn't God control everything? And these were questions that I would ask, and they wouldn't really give me these answers. And then they would start blaming the victims. Oh, the reason why slavery happened, and I'm not saying all Christian, I'm saying the church that I went to and the churches that I went to when I was part of being Pentecostal. Oh, the reason why slavery happened is because they were devil worshiping with the sun, and the reason why your native ancestors, were enslaved and their lands were taken away, so on and so forth, was because they believed in all these gods, and they didn't worship God, so God allowed the devil to punish them so that they could discover God through slavery. And so again, when I saw this card, I associated all that stuff, like, oh, God, if I use cards that don't have that image, my mom, would be like, don't use, because I asked her, like, why didn't we ever use tarot? Even though she was very Afro-Caribbean, witchy and all that stuff, she wouldn't call it witchcraft because she still had that Catholic of, I do believe in purgatory, I do still believe in hell. And so as long as I don't dabble too much and go to church and cleanse my sins, then I'm okay. So she also had that inner struggle that as long as I don't use tarot, like, I'm good, like, I'm still gonna have God's favor, and so that's what happened. Okay, even though I was drawn to this deck, I was like, well, as long as I don't ever touch this deck, then I could still do divination, because I went through a period of time when I left the church. I was very agnostic. Like, I was like, there's a God, but I don't know what God is. I got into new age practices, really started working with angelic energies, Akashic records cleansings. But I always felt like an emptiness. I practiced paganism, anything that had nothing to do with Christianity. But I always felt like something was missing for me, And even though I was in Epiritimo, I left it for the New Age and paganism because of the saint veneration. Because I'm like, when I was Pentecostal, I was like, no, you're not supposed to worship idols. You're not supposed to worship statues. You can't use tarot because it has the devil card. So I started using alternate decks. The angel tarot being one of them, Their devil card is called Ego. The Psychic Tarot Oracle deck. This is their devil card. I was okay with it. I'm like, temptation. You know what I mean? There's no Satan on this thing, right? So I was okay with, learning the traditional meaning of the devil card, as long as I didn't have the imagery of the devil card. And my mom would not use the word psychic. She would say, you have the gift of prophecy. That's what I would use too. So, like I said, when I was trying to find God, when I was trying to find my place, when I was trying to find what path I was doing, and I experimented with all these various paths, this is around the time that these decks came into my life. And the saints started to call me, so I kind of made peace with the saints. And I started learning about how they were synchronized with that, because I knew how to practice Santeria. I knew how to practice Haitian Voodoo. I knew how to do that from my mom and the mentors and my mambo. But then I started to study the historical, why are these things synchronized with saints, So as long as I use cards like this, I was like, I'm okay. Because I still had, again, that fear base of hell. I started working with the saints after that whole video that I made, after that experience with the racism, with the police, and the two assaults, the two assaults, the home invasion assault and the police assault that I had. The saints started coming to me stronger through my Indio, through my Taino, Arawak, American Indian ancestry. And my Indio started to show me the other mysteries that I had. And through that Indio, I found out who rules my head, which I'm not going to say on this video, and things like that. So using these decks, doing readings with this deck, still using the traditional meaning of the devil, I was okay with it. I just kept staying away from the Rider-Waite-Smith. Again, because there was still that little fear in the back of my mind that I was doing something bad. When I had the nervous breakdown, I had a Loa come to me, and I thought that I was doing something bad. I had a very dark spirit pretty much threatening me. I was very suicidal at the time, and it was telling me how it was going to burn my face and it was going to do all this evil stuff to me, that I needed to start reading for other people. And so I had left my spiritual practice for a while. And it wasn't until that Loa came to me and she told me, no, I'm going to give you everything you lost and more. You have to serve us. So that's when I really got into Haitian Voodoo. And I was still using these decks for client readings and things like that. When that Loa came into my life, okay, and I learned the mysteries, not just the historical, and I got my mambo, and it continued on from what my mother taught me and things like that. I got the Hanson Roberts deck, and it was the first deck that actually had a true depiction of the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith tarot and the devil card. During that whole experience when I lost everything, okay, and I realized if I was doing something good, why would a malicious spirit threaten my life? I knew that God, creator, whoever you believe he or she or they to be, called me into this path. And yes, I did get everything that I lost and more back. I realized that there's also Christian symbology in the traditional tarot deck. And so I realized that it is a very balanced deck, that life is light and shadow, and that it's good to walk in both. And that's what practicing my cultural practices has taught me, that there is evil, there is good, there is in the middle, you know what I mean? And like I said, I started to literally go back to my cultural practices and understand that the stuff the church was telling me about trying to explain away the evils of slavery because of people's religious practices, I don't jive with that type of creator. That type of God doesn't jive with me. That's not who I believe creator to be. I don't believe creator to be so evil and so egotistical that they will let people go through genocides, the Holocaust, starvation, famine, pandemics, diseases, and all these things. No, that's I don't believe that. So I made my peace with that, and that's when I finally got and I came back to the Rider-Waite Smith. I ended up buying the Radiant-Weight by accident. Then I finally got the Universal Rider-Waite Smith, and that's when my whole love affair with the Rider-Waite Smith deck started. About 6 or 7 years ago, I finally got my first Rider-Waite Smith and completely fell in love with it. When I got divorced, when I got separated, I literally had such a spiritual awakening, like I said, after the attack and after the demise of my marriage. And I started studying the symbology of tarot and seeing that there's little Christian symbology in this. There's angels, there's the devil, there's all these things in your traditional Rider-Waite Smith and the study. So when I started studying it academically, I understood the deck. I understood why this deck is an inspiration for so many decks after it. You know, I do believe in demonic spirits. I've seen them. I do believe in the Satan, not in the way that the church taught me. And I do believe in purgatory. There is a holding place for evil people. You know what I mean? And they have to do their penance, and then they get to either come back into life or they come back as spirit guides. But I do believe in a purgatory. I do not believe in a hell where God puts people that did one little thing and they're burning forever and ever. When I had a near-death experience, so this was around the time that the African spirits started coming to me, my ancestors, my Taino, so my cultural spirits really started coming, and I picked up where I left off with my mom, and then I had various teachers come into my life, and I got initiations and all these things that happen. I clinically died because I had a walking. It's not funny, but I had a heart attack like years ago, and I get nervous talking about it, so I did the weird laughing between. I didn't go to hell. So like I'm like, oh, so I'm not doing anything bad. I didn't go to hell. I actually went to different levels of heaven, and I'll do a video on it if you guys want my near-death experience, what I actually saw. I might include that in the actual paranormal series, which I'm going to pick up on. And I saw what angels actually are. I saw a lot of stuff. I literally wrote it down in a book years ago because it was such an experience, like after I woke up from everything. And it's crazy because then I found a book through somebody's channel that talks about the 7 levels of heaven, which I've never heard prior to this experience that I had. And a lot of what was written in that book was very similar to the experience that I had. I might even show you the book that I'm talking about. I don't have it on hand here. And if you guys are interested, I'll do a video on that in the future. But that's why I got into exorcisms and things like that, because there is light and shadow, there is darkness, there are bad people, there are good people, there are in-between people, you know what I mean? So there is a place for the devil card in its traditional sense in tarot. Even if you never used the Rider-Waite Smith, like it's nice to see the original symbology and how so many other decks have been inspired by it and things like that, because I feel like me making my peace with it made peace with the fact that I not only work with the right hand, but I work with the left hand. And so as I started to switch to the original Rider-Waite Smith and things like that, and Hanson Roberts with cards that had the devil in it, I noticed it was around the time I went back to my cultural practices and made peace with the fact that I believe in healing and hexing and cursing, because I used to go by the, you can't do harm to other people. Everything's love and light. Everything's happy, happy. And that did not work for me. So I feel like the acceptance of the devil card was kind of like everything coming full circle for me, and me accepting that things in life aren't perfect, and the evolution of my path to work with both light and darkness and all of these things, you know, and not seeing these things as evil or demonic or that I'm going to go to hell, because I'm going to be honest, I don't believe in hell. I didn't see hell when I was my near death experience, but I did see a purgatory like place. And like I said, if you guys want to hear that testimonial and hear about that vision that I had, that death experience that I had, you know, near death experience that I had, I'll be very open to sharing that in a future video. So, but much love, much light, much blessings. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you for watching the spirit chat. My struggles with the devil card. Hopefully this video wasn't too rambly, and it kind of made sense of how I made peace with the card and how I healed, because I still consider myself someone who is traditionally Christian, even though I'm a voodoo sant, you know, root worker and a shaman. I transitioned from Pentecostal and Protestant to no church for years, to I do occasionally visit the Catholic Church, and I kind of made my peace with that. I like the community of getting my communion and prayer circles and being part of a church. So I don't, and I did a video about labels and things like that. I don't have a problem with church and witchcraft going hand in hand, because I went back to my roots. My mom has always claimed to be a Catholic person by tradition, and then, you know, did her craft 6 days a week. So I kind of went back to the old school way of my mom too. So anyways, much love, much light, much blessing. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and until the next video, bye.